Remember, this is only a test. For decades, we heard those words as TV and radio stations conducted tests of what was long called the Emergency Broadcasting System. The Cold War era network to alert Americans of military attacks still exists today in a different form. There are some interesting hidden historic aspects to the emergency broadcast system that we want to explore tonight with Jim Dubois. He's the head of the Minnesota Broadcasters Association. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you too, Cathy.
CONELRAD, was that the beginning of this emergency broadcast system?
It was indeed. What a scary sounding acronym too. It stood for Control of Electromagnetic Radiation. It dates back to 1951. And if you want to look back at the historical context, you'll see where it all came from. In 1941, the infamous date, December 7th, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese airplanes actually homed in on the radio signal of the Honolulu station. So the authorities were extremely concerned now with the start of the Cold War, the threat of communism, that somehow Soviet bombers would home in on U.S. broadcasting stations and find their way to targets. So they hatched the idea of CONELRAD, and that was the idea: control the broadcast signals. So under CONELRAD, again, 1951, virtually every station, save a few in the country, would go off the air. All TV stations, the few FM stations that were on at the time, and most AMs. They had a series of large AM radio stations called at that time the key stations. They're now called the primary entry point stations, but stations like in this market WCCO AM with a powerful signal.
Watts,
right, exactly. They stayed on, but it got even more interesting than that. In order to confuse the bombers, they would confine all the stations that remained on the air to two frequencies. This is about a 1954 vintage radio.
Beautiful.
640 kilohertz and 1240 kilohertz. And it got even more intricate than that. In order to confuse the bombers, every station could only broadcast for a few minutes, after which time they would shut off and allow another station to come on the air. So every radio manufactured in this country from approximately 1951 to 1963 had to have the CONELRAD marks, the little civil defense in a triangle symbol. Same thing for this transistor radio. This is vintage about 1960, and right now it's tuned to 640 kilohertz, where you would have heard the CONELRAD stations.
Speaking of the actual messages, we have an amazing piece of tape that was found, as you know, at the WCCO radio transmitter, which of course is built, you know, it's like a bomb shelter anyway, so it's out the transmitter. And this is a piece of tape, the great Howard Viken. So let's listen to this.
This is Howard Viken, your official civil defense announcer. Federal authorities have said we may possibly be attacked by an enemy. Here are some instructions from your civil defense organization. Remain calm. Keep your radio tuned to this station. If your children are in school, they will be sent home. Do not go to the school for your children unless this is a part of your school defense plan. Assemble stores of food, warm clothing, water, and medical supplies. Do not use the telephone. Don't attempt to drive toward the larger cities. Keep tuned to this station for further information.
Wow. By the way, that was from radiotapes.com, a great service from Tom Gavaris, who is amassing all these great little bits of Minnesota broadcasting history tape. What would have happened? This has never been heard, of course. What was Howard doing? How would this have been? How would you have heard something like this?
My understanding is the tapes were at the transmitter site, and they would have been played from that location in the event of an actual attack. Now, it's interesting, as you noticed, Howard said, drive at least 50 miles, do not try to drive through the city. He never mentions the city, and that again was because of security. They didn't want to give the enemy any information. But if you listen to that tape, and there's several others on the Radio Tapes website, very chilling and surrealistic, saying, for example, go to your basement, bring a portable radio with you. If you don't have one, turn up loudly the radio you have upstairs so you can hear it in the basement. And we all know what protection basements would not have afforded us, but that was the popular advice at the time.
You know, I was talking to the great Charlie Boone recently, and I said, did they ever tell you guys what to do in case the emergency broadcast system went off? Because as an announcer, I have no idea. And he said, no. Presumably, if it were under attack, you would hear this particular bit of tape. But what would happen for even testing this for an announcer?
Well, what happened was they had a checklist, and there was a little red envelope for the emergency broadcasting system. I'm not sure exactly what they did with CONELRAD, but the bottom line was you would hear 10 bells on an old-fashioned teletype machine. You'd go rip it off. It would say, nuclear warning or whatever, national emergency. You would then see on it a word, an authenticator word. You'd pull the red envelope out, rip it open, check to make sure that that word matched the word of the day. And if it did, you assumed it was the real thing.
Okay. Now, we don't have enough time to actually play this bit of tape, but go to radiotapes.com and listen to the WOWO 1971. Actually, the poor announcer thought that they were under attack. Go to the website, though. So the emergency broadcast system nowadays is?
It's called still the Emergency Alert System, and it's integrating something we call IPAWS. That's the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. So in other words, the warnings are going beyond now the traditional outdoor sirens, the radio and television alerts. It's incorporating wireless media, the wireless emergency alerts. You now get them on your phone. More social media will be used. It'll be basically taking all potential channels and using them to warn the public.
Wow. This, by the way, is one heck of a great piece of broadcasting history there. Thanks for bringing it in. Jim Dubois, thanks.
Oh, Cathy, always a pleasure.
See you later.
See you.